Hello, welcome to Math for All, where we try to make math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. I'm Molly Vokey.
And I'm Heidi Subnani. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're really excited to speak with Mike Flynn. And we are live on Twitter, otherwise known as X, Facebook, and on YouTube. So we hope that you will follow along in those spaces. And you can always catch up later if you would like.
Yes. And we are going to be talking about how we support people, probably a lot about teachers and administrators, but not limited to that, caregivers of any kind that are struggling with the change in mathematics education. So we're super excited about this topic today, not only because this is like an awesome topic, but because we really love talking to Mike Flynn. So let me introduce him to you. Dr. Mike Flynn is a national leader and change agent in mathematics education. He is the CEO and founder of Flynn Education, supporting school districts to enhance the teaching and learning of mathematics for all students pre-K to 12. Prior to this work, he was the director of math leadership programs at Mount Holyoke College for 10 years, and he taught second grade for 14 years in Southampton, Mass. Mike is the author of Beyond Answers, Exploring Mathematical Practices with Young Children, and has contributed to many educational journals and publications. In 2008, he was named the Massachusetts Teacher of the Year and was the recipient of the 2010 Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics Teaching. So, let him join us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We're excited. So, we saw Mike at NCTM in the fall, and he said, I would like to be on your show. And we were like, okay, let's do it. So super exciting.
And I'm sure many people have heard about you, but we'd like to start with what is your math story, just in case someone is not familiar with your background and how you came to be where you are today in math.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's to frame it. So I never actually really liked math as a student, and I actually didn't like math as a teacher when I started, which shocks people because my whole career is math education. Mm-hmm. And I'll explain a little bit why. So for me, when I grew up, math was very much just sit and get. We would just copy lots of exercises in the workbooks and things and board work, lots of time testing and stuff. And I've learned later in life, much later, that I have slow processing speed. Mm-hmm. I'm a slow reader, but I remember everything I've read. I'm slow with computation, but I'm a really creative problem solver. And but that kind of thinking just didn't fit the style of school at the time. And so everything I was learning about myself in mathematics was that I'm not good at this. And I just to kind of prove my point, I ran into my former sixth grade teacher this summer at a concert. We had a local concert in town, and he's like, Michael? And I'm like, I look at him, I'm like, Mr. Clapp? Like, and so we started chatting a little bit. And he's like, so what do you do? And I said, well, I travel around the world and I consult in school districts everywhere around mathematics. He's like, really? I mean, that's, I mean, he really like, I didn't see that coming, right? I didn't see you going the math route. Which is kind of funny. And it was a good moment. I actually got to talk to him about how like sort of my trajectory with learning and stuff. But really it wasn't until, it's kind of a funny story. Like math was just something you did. Like I was okay at it. Like I just didn't enjoy it. It was super boring. It was super boring to teach because I got hired in a school that used the investigations math curriculum, but I didn't know how to use it. Actually, one other funny story is it's actually the reason I got hired, because I knew they had just recently adopted it. And during my interview, I just kept the woman I student taught with had it. And we kind of used it a little bit, but I embellished on my resume that I had some extensive experience with investigations math. And
they're like, sign you right up.
And they didn't call me out. They just said, oh, and you have investigation experience. Like, oh, yeah. And so I got hired, and I remember when I was transitioning into the position, the woman I was taking over for, she she was going to be the computer teacher in the same school. She was just changing positions. And she said, like, this first week, why don't we, like, you teach some of the day and I'll teach some of the day. Cause it was like January. I just finished student teaching. And so she goes, why don't you take the math? Since like, that's your thing. So she gave me the investigations book. And of course I didn't read it. Like, I didn't know, I just was thumbing through to see what the black line masters were, like what you had to do. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of easy. So the kids come in, she goes to set up the computer lab. And I just show the kids this sheet. I'm like, well, just do this. I just show them how to do it. And they did it. And they were done in like a minute. Right. And then it's like, so I grabbed, and this teacher, if anyone's familiar with the old investigations curriculum, like before they had like workbooks, all the black line masters were in the back, and like lots of teachers would print them all for a whole unit and have them up like in folders and stuff. So I just went over the folders. I took the next one, showed the kids, said, just do this. And they did it. And then got the next one. I went through almost half or more than half their entire unit in like one period. Like, yeah. So anyway,
you're very efficient.
Hey, I'm telling you, I crushed it. Yeah. Because I had no idea. It was so bad. I was so embarrassed. But here's the thing. So I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't particularly good at it. But there was this time where I was really into literacy, and the school had this grant and they needed someone to be a literacy coordinator. And I was all in. I'm like, I want to do this. I want to get trained. I want to be able to train teachers. Like, I really loved it. And I didn't get it. And I was actually told by the principal that I was too young to be taken seriously. I was like 26 years old, and it's like, it needs to go to a more seasoned teacher and stuff. And I was kind of mad. Like, I was a little bitter. Right. So across the hall from me was this woman named Anne-Marie O'Reilly. And she worked with the investigations curriculum. She was a trainer for them, and they were revising the curriculum, and she was going to be a field test teacher. She said, well, hey, Mike, I wasn't going to ask you because you were doing all the literacy stuff, but now that you don't have that position, she's like, we could use another field test teacher for this. And I'm like, hard pass. No, thank you. And she's like, well, there's like a $2,000 stipend if you do it. And I'm brand new teacher, broke it, get out, right?
Oh,
I'm like,
actually, suddenly I'm available.
Yeah. So I went and so I had no idea what this even involved. But I heard 2,000. I'm like, I can do that. But it required us, like, this is like this moment of like luck, really. Being a field test teacher meant you had to, first of all, commit to actually teaching the curriculum, like really like as designed, right? They were giving you like fresh off the press, like newly written material that you would try out, and they would come in, the authors would come in and observe. There would be like a video crew in there, and things would be audio recorded and everything. So you just had to step up and do that. But then you also had to do, like, every other week or so, professional learning. And I was doing professional learning with these people I'd never heard of before, like Deborah Shifter and Susan Joe Russell and Virginia Basketball.
Yeah.
And
no big names there at all.
No big names at all. No. And it's like, and I mean, I'm getting trained by like the greatest people in math education, right? And it's like, and my world just blew up. It's like, this is what math teaching can be like. It was incredible. And so just doing that, and then doing the DMI courses, and like going to Mount Holyoke and doing it, like we used to call it getting our math fix. We'd go over after school and just do all of this professional learning. It transformed me as a teacher. And then because I really loved it and was all in, I ended up getting hired as an investigations workshop leader. So that got me, in the summertime, instead of painting houses, I got to fly around the country and train people on how to use the curriculum. And then just like my career just kind of blew up with like just a lot of this math work. And then Virginia Bastable, and she was going to be retiring, and they were kind of looking to see who might replace her. And Deborah suggested that I might be a good candidate for that. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Like, I can't be Virginia. Like no one can fill those shoes. But you know, enough encouragement. I actually went over and did that and ran that program, and sort of, I mean, it's brought me to sort of where I am today. And it's, it all was because I didn't get this literacy position, and there was this $2,000 stipend that seemed like really interesting at the time and necessary. So I kind of fell into math accidentally, if you will. But I'm so glad I did, because I couldn't be happier. I absolutely love what I do.
Isn't it amazing, the twists and turns which happen? Like, you couldn't ever predict your own life.
No.
And you can't plan it. You can kind of plan it, but you really can't. planet exactly. It's kind of amazing.
Well, and I think sometimes having a background where you didn't immediately excel in math the way that it was written or taught to us in the past, or the ability to like see it as it truly should be done as the important thing. I think, sometimes people expect that it comes easy if you're in a particular field, like, oh, that was just easy for you, or you just think that way, versus actually struggling at times, or like having to really work at it. I think helps both the teachers that we work with and the students that we work with make those connections as well, that this can be something that you learn or that you appreciate. We just are not looking at it in a way that maybe makes sense to you, or we need to kind of change the way that we've been doing things in the past.
Yeah, that's a
But
good
that's
point.
also like oh, I'm sorry, Mike. That's kind of an
Yeah.
impetus, especially in your story, right? Because here you are not really loving math, and then you realize, like, wait, this is math, and I thought
Yeah.
this was math. So, in a way, it kind of was almost the reason why you ended up being in math. And I feel like we've heard several stories kind of like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember like early in that process, I turned to one of my colleagues in the field test group and said, if I had learned math this way, everything would have been different. I mean, I'm glad, like, I am so happy with like the way my life all went, like no regrets at all, but like it really would have been a very different experience. I wouldn't have had all of that sort of negative, connotation with mathematics. And the thing that I like in the role that I do now, so when I get to work in schools and I work with preschool teachers and high school teachers and coaches and everything, is that I work with a lot of people who are like me or were like me, like feeling not great about math, not having a lot of confidence or not enjoying it. And what I found, and this is what I like to communicate with people, is like I think math is it really is it's about the accumulation of experiences. And if you think about this, think about like young children who have difficulty in mathematics, and a lot of times it's students that haven't had lots of opportunities of counting, or they've depending on like their like preschool, or if they even went to preschool, or like if you don't have a lot of experiences counting, playing games, and looking at spatial reasoning things, all of this, you can feel like when you start kindergarten that you're already like behind a bit, right? Like, and it doesn't mean that you can't learn, right? It's like what we need is to give kids more and more experiences. And I kind of like to reframe what we do as teachers is that we're the creators of experiences for kids, and it's our duty to make sure that that students and participants, adult learners, get the kinds of experiences they need. And I like to think about, like, for me, it was at 26 years old, I got the experiences I needed to finally like math and to finally see what math could really offer. And I mean, it took 26 years for that to happen. And so I always encourage teachers, if they feel that way, like it's never too late. Like my whole career changed drastically because of these experiences. And it made me want more of those experiences. And the more experiences I had, the more confident I got, the more interested I got. And I haven't stopped learning. I mean, that's kind of the process. So anyway, yeah, that's it helps. I feel like it puts me in a good position in supporting teachers, having walked that path for a long time.
I think that leads us right into our main question, which
it certainly does.
when we think about how we support people, regardless of what their position or role in mathematics is, that are really struggling with the change in math education.
And I think any listener that we might possibly have could benefit from this, because if you're a teacher, you are dealing with parents who are potentially coming to you with this, I hate math, or I hate the new math kind of thing. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot. So, yeah. And as you all know me, I'm constantly going to tell stories too, just to frame things. But like my journey down this path on understanding resistance to change, like started from like having a really bad coaching experience. I was doing some professional learning in a school, and I encountered one of the rudest people I've ever met, who just like, I mean, just mocked what I was doing openly in front of everybody, including the principal. And it derailed me in this afternoon when I was trying to lead this work with teachers. And I, I was just like, you just sort of get knocked off balance a little bit. And so you're trying to like listen to people talk about their math. I'm not even really listening. And like, I'm stammering, which I don't normally do. And I remember driving home being fired up. Like, what? Like, I was so mad at him. And then I started to like turn inward and be like, I can't do this. Like, this is so hard. Like, I don't want to be like, that felt so awful in the moment. And I think anyone who, whether you're a teacher and you've had a caregiver, like, give you some grief about something with math, or you're a coach or any kind of leader, I think we've all had those moments, or many of those moments.
Yeah.
That's the other hard part of change. But I realized after I slept on it was like, when I taught second grade, I had kids who didn't want to read. I call them a reading group. I had one kid who chucked the book, and I couldn't, as the teacher, say, "Well, fine, Johnny, then you'll just be illiterate," and like it just like just called myself without responsibility. Right? You don't do that as a teacher, because you're like, all right, it's not this is behavior that he has, but there's something that's causing that behavior, and I need to figure out what that is and figure out the way to work with him so he will start to read. Right? I had to do that, and I realized you have to do that as a leader too. You have to, like, I need to find the way to like connect with this guy. I need to find what is causing these behaviors and try to work with it. And so I challenged myself to learn about resistance in math education. Now, I shouldn't admit this, but I will. One thing that motivates me to learn something is if I get myself on the hook to present about it. So coincidentally,
Yeah, we know nothing about that.
We actually know a lot about that too.
So coincidentally, this was around the time proposals for NCSM were due. And so I wrote a proposal on understanding and addressing resistance in math education. And I talked about all the stuff I was going to present on, that I was going to learn about. And you send it off, and then you usually wait for that email. But I actually got a call from the program chair to say, "Hey, we are really excited about this proposal, and we want to make it one of the major sessions." And I'm like, oh man, like I am really in it now. And the funny thing is, she's like, "And we can't wait to hear, all the stuff you've been researching." I'm like, me neither.
I cannot wait to do that research.
Yeah. And so, but this is the thing, this put me on this journey where I really started, I went all in. I was reading, like, obviously, like books like Elena Aguilar, Jim Knight and stuff. You go into like the standard, like math coaching, but then I started getting to like Chip and Dan Heath with Switch, the like Art of Influence, the Persuasion, Advocacy, all of these books outside of education. And like the journey has been absolutely amazing, and I haven't stopped. Like I really feel like I've become like a Jedi of change, because I've learned so much. And the thing is, it works. Like this stuff really works. Like the guy at this particular school, like we're not buds, we're not best friends, but I got really good movement with him. Like I was able to help him see the value in what we were trying to do, and to actually like do it, not out of compliance, but out of like, yeah, I get this. I see where this is going. And so I'll frame a little bit about like what I've learned. And because there's so much, like I'm going to, like I have one talk that I gave, like actually is all related to that particular instance. And it's the talk that I did for NCSM. NCTM, I did it there as well, and they recorded it, and it's on my YouTube channel. So if you just go on Mike Flynn and YouTube and Resistance, you all can see that. And that talks about one area that's Chip and Dan Heath, Elena Aguilar stuff. What I'm going to talk about now, though, is something that's bigger. And I actually think it's like, this is something that is not specific to math. It's actually just any kind of change. And what I like about this is it deals with like the real hard change, like the change where you have people who have really deep values and beliefs that are really hard to change. And this is in math, it's in education, it's in like equity. Like there are many use cases for this kind of work. And so what it is Jack Mesereau's transformative learning is like the secret sauce here. And if, for those who aren't familiar with it, so like Malcolm Knowles and andragogy, like adult learning theory. Well, there's many other adult learning theories, and Jack Mesereau in the 70s like coined this phrase transformative, also known as transformational learning. And to me, it is what any of us who work as change agents in education, we need to be well versed in that, because there's a lot of stages to it and there's a lot of elements to it. But there's really the one I want to address really tonight is the critical like stage one of this process. But I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna share my screen just for a minute, just kind of replace myself with my slides here for a moment, just to frame this a little bit. So if we think about like one challenge with change is that it usually, when we think if district leader or principal or math coach or someone wants someone to change, we usually start with knowledge acquisition. It's like, all right, let's say I would love for a teacher to start using the 5 practices. I want them to really orchestrate a productive discussion. Well, maybe what I should do is like maybe do a PD with on the 5 practices, or maybe give her an article on the 5 practices, or show her a video on it, or model it for it. Like there's all these different things, all in the service of giving this teacher knowledge of what the 5 practices are, how to implement it and stuff. And then the next stage would be trying out the new role, like trying this out. And typically what happens is if somebody doesn't have a belief system that would allow them to really see the value in this, then when they try that new role and they make a mistake, which is going to happen, right? Anytime you try a new role, like you're always going to have a little like hiccup here and there. And so when they try a new role and have a hiccup, what ends up happening is they just hit frustration, and it becomes evidence for why this was a dumb change in the first place. And all the rest of the process is gone, and they just retreat back to what they were doing before. And it's because we haven't addressed the beliefs. Beliefs are everything with change. I want you to think about this right now. NCTM talks about productive beliefs and unproductive beliefs in mathematics. So let's name some unproductive beliefs. So for 2 of you, what are some unproductive beliefs that you've encountered in mathematics?
That you have to know your multiplication facts in order to really do anything past 4th grade. But, let's throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong one. I mean, I feel like mine would be specifically about teaching, and like I have to stand in front of the class in order for kids to learn. Like I have to be the main show kind of thing,
right?
Yeah,
it's all about you, right? Yeah. But that's a big thing, right? That's a real, so like some people, that's their identities. Because this is the thing with beliefs, right? So we have like light beliefs, like you're like, what's your take on Hawaiian pizza?
Hard no.
Thank you.
Hard no.
Both of you hard no?
Yeah.
Please. Oh, please. It is okay. So I'll die on this hill. I'll tell you. Hawaiian pizza is absolutely the best toppings for, like, it is the best pizza ever because it's the perfect combination of sweet and salty. Right now, you all can disagree with me, and you're wrong. I'll just say it, but you can disagree with me. But notice that we can have this sort of banter around this.
Yes.
But there's other beliefs that we have that are closer to our core, and the core beliefs shape our identity. So it's not just like something, it's not like a strong opinion. It's like it really shapes how we see ourselves and how we see the world. And so, for example, if my belief is that a really good teacher is a really good explainer and can really explain things well, and that's because all my teachers are good explainers and I'm a good explainer. And so if I have to do some kind of change to my instructional practice where I'm going to launch with a problem, but not show the kids how to do this, and they're going to go work on whiteboards collaboratively in random groups. Like, are you kidding me? Like I can't control that, right? It goes against everything that I believe. So even if I go to see Peter Liljedahl's training and I read Building Thinking Classrooms, and I read the 5 practices, and I read Principles to Actions, all of that stuff, unless something disrupts this belief system that the Mike show, that I'm in charge of this. I can try to implement some of these things, but I'm going to eventually find my way back to the comfort zone because it matches what I believe. So the whole thing with Jack Mesro's transformational learning is that the very first stage of it, and this is going to look overwhelming. So I'm just going to go full screen here for a second, but I'm also going to like shrink it down so it's not as overwhelming. So
Well,
you're going to see there are 10 stages here, and it's way overwhelming. Like, don't look at this all now. But step one is a disorienting dilemma. And I'll actually I'm going to color code these now and just look at these in 4 sections. So we could think of like the beginning is like disorientation. And this is where we're disrupting belief systems. After that, there's reorientation, where we're okay. So if we are now going to cause people to like challenge their beliefs, they're going to be lost a little bit. So we need to reorient them to a more productive belief. And then there's application, and then integration. So that's kind of it. This is an easier way to see the transformational learning. But I want us to let's make it like really simple here. This is the one I want to talk about right now, the disorienting dilemma. And what it's defined as is an acute internal or external personal crisis that causes a person to call into question their values, beliefs, and assumptions. And what I'm going to do here, I don't need to share my screen anymore because I just want to kind of frame those first sections of it, is when you have a disorienting dilemma, there's not a direct formula. You can't always tell exactly what's going to cause that disruption, but you can orchestrate a lot of them. Sometimes they happen organically. So for me, I just always thought math is just what you explain to kids and things. And for me, the disorienting dilemma came when I started doing the professional learning with all the other people doing the field tests who were all really familiar with investigations. And so in the course of doing that work, I started to see that this makes a lot of sense. Like making an array to look at the distributive property and like decomposing that, like I finally was getting it, and it just flipped for me. Like I just had this moment of like, we don't actually want to explain all this stuff. It's like if I explain it, the kids don't make the connections. Like and so it was mind blowing. Now for me, the thing that happens with like that first disorienting dilemma, when you have that, it does trigger emotions. And so for me, it was relief and excitement because I didn't like math. I wasn't coming from a place of like, ooh, I'm such a good math teacher. And because I'm a good explainer, that my kids hated math. It was super boring. I didn't enjoy it. And now I just saw that there's a possibility of relearning the way to teach that's super engaging, right? So I had a really good experience, but it can also have the opposite effect. So I was working in a school where a teacher, she was a 6th grade teacher, and her belief as we were doing our planning for a learning lab was that my kids, they can't talk. Like they need kind of, Molly, what you were saying, they need to be shown what to do. And so as I was talking about, oh, we should just lead with the problem and like going to integrate some whiteboards and all of this. She's like, no. We have to pre-teach and stuff because they can't handle this on their own. And they won't, if you try to have a conversation, you're going to get crickets, There's all this stuff of what they can't do. Deficit thinking and stuff. So, and I never openly challenge people in these, like you all know with coaching and stuff, that it's about relationship building and trust. And so I like to validate what they're saying and because it's from their perspective's real. And I also say, like, this is what I like about learning labs. It's a chance for us to like experiment and test things out. And I'm the one on the hook. So if it's crickets, it's me in the hot seat. So let's just go try it anyway. And of course I like to encourage that to happen. So when we get in there, I'm pretty sure it's going to be okay. And this is what happened. The kids talked. They had really good discussions. And my colleague Sarah was with me too. And it was a really good lab. And we came back and she was crying. And because that's the other thing. If the stage 2 in transformative learning is like the emotional response to the disorienting dilemma. And so for some it's positive, but for some it can be negative. And here's where it gets really challenging for leaders. If you aren't there to support them when they have that. So when that teacher was crying, if we just said, do that for you, and we went on and just debriefed how good that was, like we're going to lose it because nobody likes to feel that way. And so a defense mechanism would be to dismiss what just happened as a, well, there was two outside people, so it was stranger danger. The kids
Right.
stepped up because there's other teachers. And then they would build up a little wall of defenses, and it's going to be even harder to crack through it and disrupt that belief system again. They're gonna fortify themselves around that. And so instead, what we want to be is present for that. We want to recognize that this is going to happen. And so, so what I do in those moments is validate everything she's feeling. And I also, it's stage 4, which is to relate to others. So I also wanted to make sure that I could say, without lying, like, I was 100% where you were. Like, this is how I taught second grade. I lectured these kids all the time. Like, most of us have gone through this journey. Like, and so what you try to do in that moment is validate, support, and try to orient them to look at a logical reason for this. Because stage 3 is like logically considering why you had that belief in the first place. So we can talk about it. So why would we think it? Because I thought that, and you think that. Why would we think that you have to just explain to kids? And she would say, like, well, that's because that's how I learned and stuff. And that's all I've ever seen. And no one ever taught me differently. And it's like, yeah, it makes total sense. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. Every one of us, or most of us, have kind of gone through that path. And what that does is it doesn't invalidate her experience or her beliefs. There may still be guilt and shame and things, but you work through that. You logically think of why that would happen, and then we look at how other people have gone through that journey. And where we end up now is you have someone who's like, okay, well, if I'm not going to explain, then what can I do? And that's that whole reorienting. And so this is where, as leaders, that's where we start working toward knowledge acquisition. We start thinking about, well, like, let's look at some different options. Let's consider this. Like, let's look at the 5 practices. Let's look at building thinking classrooms. Let's look at like a number talk. Let's start small. It doesn't even have to be this huge, big thing. And we start considering like different things we could explore. And then we work from their comfort zone. And this is the thing. So I'm giving this actually as a present, like, this is my talk this year on like the conference circuit. And the title of it is Be the Guide, Not the Hero, around supporting people in this change. Because I used to think as the math coach that like I'm supposed to like save people, like fix them and do all this stuff. That's like early, like in this work. What you've learned though is like really good math coaches are like Yoda to Luke Skywalker, right? Or like Morpheus to Neo, or like pick any other like hero's journey, right? Gandalf to Frodo. They are supportive, but you want the teacher to be the hero on their journey. That's the whole point. And so we let this teacher like decide, like, I think maybe starting with number talks, that kind of feels comfortable. I can do that right now. So then we make a plan and we do knowledge acquisition around like, let's like look at like how to do number talks. Let's read some articles. Let's watch some class video. Let me do one with your students and stuff. Now let me try it. And so what ends up happening is they now are at that first stage I talked about before, where it's knowledge acquisition. But the difference is they want it because they want something different. And so transformative learning to me is like when we're looking at resistance in anything, I think our biggest job is to figure out what are the underlying belief systems that are causing that resistance. And so I'll pause for a second for your reactions, because I get so geeked out with this stuff and I realize I'm giving my presentation right now. So
I mean, it reminds me of being a parent. Right? Because you get to certain stages of your kids' growth and you realize you do not know what to do, or in my case, one child doesn't respond in my natural way of delivering information and or parenting, whatever. So you have to learn how to do it anew so that it can be effective. Because if you just continue to do the same thing that you've been doing that's not been working, then your relationship with said child is no longer. And actually you can't have that because they live with you. So it reminds me very much of that learning curve for me, which was way too long.
But I
But
think
it describes the stages very
Mhm.
clinically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, we sometimes see that resistance is maybe not resistance in the same way. So,
Yes.
I mean, I used the same theory in my dissertation work, and the idea that teachers are being in my case, I was working with teachers who had math anxiety, and so it was that idea of like they were resistant to the work that we'd been trying to do,
Mhm.
not because they weren't interested in doing something different for kids, but more they were really afraid that no one would listen to them about their
Yeah.
own fears and traumatic experiences themselves with learning mathematics and not understanding that there was a different way to do it. And so it's that idea of like that often came across as resistance in grade level meetings or in coaching cycles or in and because someone had dismissed that before
Mhm.
or not taken their story seriously. And so those like they were actually very willing to make changes and to learn to experience math differently, but the initial presentation
Mm.
was like, leave me alone, don't talk to
Yeah.
me, like I'm zero interest in spending any time with you at all. Why am
Yeah.
I in this professional development? Why am I, sitting in this? And
Mhm.
so it wasn't even so much a resistance to change as um that I may have taken that, like if I wasn't willing to sit and learn more about them, if then I just like, well, they're just not interested in change. So
Mm.
Yeah.
this is then
Right.
it is once again their problem versus a larger like system that they've been operating in that was not a safe space for them to
Mhm.
explore different ways of learning math.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's so important, Heidi, because it gets at like, so it reminds me of a few things. So the one of them is like Jim Knight talks about resistance kind of falling into two categories.
Mhm,
One is it's either like a value thing, like is it worth it? Like, or it's a confidence thing. It's like,
mhm,
can I do it? Like, so
mhm,
like, and so that's sort of like a very like, you know, simplistic way of putting it, but
mhm,
it's a good way to start is like, is do they not see the value in this change, or
mhm.
not do they not have the confidence in their ability to enact this change?
Yep.
But there's also, and I can't remember her name, but the article she wrote was "Turning Resistant Teachers into Resilient Teachers." Heather's her first name, and I can't recall her last
Yep.
name, but she was a principal, and it was an article for ASCD. And
Mhm,
but in that
okay.
article, she talked about the categories of resistance, and
Mhm,
that and you're kind of getting at that, like where we might sometimes just think it's we don't realize that there's a cause underlying
mhm.
the resistance. And so some people resist because they don't have the confidence in it.
Yeah.
They just aren't confident in their math abilities,
Mhm,
or they don't have the knowledge. Right? And sometimes that those two
mhm.
kind of play off each other. But sometimes people resist because they resist administrative change. Like if you've been around the block enough, and if you're in a district with high turnover, it's like,
Mhm,
all right, it's year 3, new principal, new initiatives. All right, 3 more years later, new principal, new initiatives. At
mhm.
some point, you're like, I'm out. I'm not
Yeah.
doing the swing
I'm
anymore.
just gonna
Like
wait
we're
you out. Yeah.
yeah, um, like but that requires a different treatment, right? A
Mhm,
different approach than someone who doesn't have confidence or doesn't
mhm,
have the knowledge. There's people who resist out of exhaustion. Like
mhm,
think about like coming off pandemic, or
mhm,
like
Oh,
your
yeah.
district now. We've got the new math initiative because we just
mhm.
got the new materials, but the science of reading's coming in here as well, and we have the new science kits that have come in,
Yeah.
and we've got some social emotional stuff we're going to be doing,
Yeah.
and then we're also going to do some resilient work for some yoga too, just to make us feel great. Right? It's just meeting after meeting after meeting, and people are just tanked, and like
Mhm,
that's a real problem.
mhm,
That's another kind of resistance,
mhm.
and in some ways you can almost say that's like valid resistance. I kind of get
Yeah.
it, but as a coach, excuse me, we have to think about what's the support. So the approach I'm going to take with someone who's exhausted is not the approach I'm going to take with someone who's just tired of like administrative change. There's also a different one. There's also people, it's a personality thing. Like sometimes they're just resisting change that was initiated by this individual. Like, I don't like this principal. So whatever they say, I'm not going to do. That's a whole other approach. And so that's part, like transformative learning fits within this as well. But these are other elements around understanding and addressing resistance. Is Elena Aguilar calls it taking an inquiry stance of really trying to see things from people's viewpoints, like intellectual empathy, like really getting in and appreciating that. And I find that combining that, because that's what I first started doing. But once I combined that with transformative learning, while I'm doing that inquiry stance to figure out why, like what's triggering that behavior, why did he shout out in front of that principal and everyone else in that PD, like what's causing that? I also think about what are the underlying belief systems they might have. And the nice thing too is, like, sometimes like the person you're trying to work with, like this dude, I'll just call him Sam. I'll just make it like, yeah, I just don't want to out anyone, but Sam, let's just say Sam. I didn't have any kind of relationship with him. So I couldn't just say, hey, Sam, like, tell me about your beliefs. Like, he would tell me.
I'll tell you what I believe, buddy.
Yeah. And it wouldn't have choice words in there. So that wouldn't work. But many times we do have some collegial relationships with people that we can say, so just talk to me about sort of like what do you see as like in a really effective classroom? Like, what's the role of the teacher? Like, what's the role of the students? Like, what does that look like? If you were to design like the perfect math class, that's a really like safe conversation to have with people. It can give you a lot of good information. Like, I should be in the front of the room and like it should be quiet and things, versus like there should be movement and knowledge mobility and stuff. And so these are all things that help us to understand what beliefs are shaping their whole viewpoint in math education. And as I said, this also goes with equity. Like if I work in schools where people tell them, they say, well, what about those kids? Like that is that's such a triggering phrase. Those kids, like I already kind of feel myself tensing up, and I shouldn't be doing the post shoulder surgery. Like, but it's like, that's really problematic, because and those kids can be lots of different categories of kids, and it's never good. I've never like where like those kids are my favorite. It never is followed with that, right? It's always a deficit thing, and it's whether it's a racial thing, or if it's an ethnicity thing, or it's a language or disability.
But it's often when people say those kids, I feel that it's their own inability to understand how to teach those kids.
Yeah.
Right. So their own insecurities about being ineffective with a population that they don't understand and or just don't know how to connect with educationally.
Exactly. And this is where I love this transformative learning, because when you so I'll give just another example. I'm going to be very general with this. Is like, but I do a lot of high school work, and so I was working in a high school that is really diverse school, like diverse needs, diverse races and ethnicities and language, and it really just like it was a great school. Like I love going there, and in the planning process, I heard so much of what kids can't do. Like they can't do so this, and even if they come to class, they're not going to participate. All this other stuff, like because it's just deficit thinking. And again, I just say, all right, like, and it's a learning lab, so let's try this. Like, what happens if we disrupt this system? Like, what if we teach math very differently? So we redesigned this geometry lesson, and I went in and the first thing I did is ask everyone to come up and gather around me in front of the room. And you could see they were like rolling their eyes and stuff, because it's like, who's this guy and stuff. But within 5 minutes, we're having this conversation about just what regularity we're starting to notice with, we were doing like some of the measures of interior angles of convex polygons. So I wanted the lesson was, like basically just showing kids like it's the number of sides -2, like n minus 2 times 180, like just give them the formula and teach them it. But I actually was having the kids derive that formula, like, and they were just in it, the discussion, they're like debating. And then I said, all right, do you think this, they were decomposing a square into like two triangles, and it's like, oh, it's 180 and 180. And like, and so I said, well, do you think that would work with like a pentagon or hexagon? And so they went off on whiteboards. And so it's like full on building thinking classrooms, knowledge mobility, moving around, and they're testing things out. And someone drew a decagon, and like it's and this formula that they figured out worked. And we came back and we debriefed, and it was transformational. I mean, that's what this is. The teacher said, I want that every day. Like what just happened, he just didn't think it was possible. And like, this is the thing that we need to do. And then, so what this happens now is like, so you do this moment. So now he's thinking, what do I need to do to be able to make that happen? Well, like some of this is like, yeah, like let's learn about building thinking classrooms, but let's also let's read Choosing to See, right? Let's start thinking about the impact of identity, and let's think about resources. Like, let's look at some of Robert Barry's work, right, around teaching Black boys, right? And I think of all of these things now that this teacher who may not have been ready to think about this stuff, this is what transformative learning can do, is it breaks these belief systems. And this can be beliefs on who's capable of math, or beliefs on how like kids learn. And it can be like, this is real change. And it's like, and it's hard work. And it requires you to really get in there, and you're putting people in uncomfortable situations sometimes. But it can happen. And so just one other quick thing around this is, so you can orchestrate these in different ways. Like one of the best ways is, if anytime people have beliefs about what kids can or can't do, doing stuff in their classrooms is the way to do it, like, because you're going to see it. But there's other ways to do this as well. So like, I remember people who had unproductive beliefs. A lot of times when I work with middle school and high school, the use of manipulatives always feels like downplayed. Like, it's just a waste of time. It's gonna, even upper elementary, sometimes it's like, we don't have time
It's
for
too
that.
loud.
Yeah.
They're
All
gonna throw it.
Yeah. The kids think it's for babies. But we've heard all the excuses, right? Well, in a professional learning setting, have that group of teachers do work in base 5, and then have base 5 blocks available. I guarantee that's like, I just did this yesterday with teachers in Utah. And it's one of those things where like, people will say, like, when I debrief afterwards, and say, all right, so like, what insight you got? We need to get manipulatives. Like, that's like the first thing. And it'll be like, people sometimes who are like adamantly opposed to manipulatives, they change their tune when they have that experience, because it's not enough. When you want people to change, it's not enough to make them think something. You've got to make them feel something. And that's where this comes in. So anyway, I'll pause again, because I've been going on for a while, and I know we want to also wind down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder, and I like throwing this out there as a, like, how we have to then structure the work that we do as professional development providers and or coaches or support, like those of us who are in the support role. And for administrators who are looking for like change, like you were here for a day, like, can you just talk a little bit about how that might look different if we're working for like lasting transformational change versus checking the box of like initiative check?
Yeah. So if I rephrase this question, so like, how does thinking about transformational learning in the context of our roles as leaders, like, how does that like shape our work within like systems that are usually like, just doing like the initiatives that just keep moving along this conveyor belt, right?
Yeah. Well, and like time, like this work takes longer. Yes. Than just, and like knowing and planning for that, I think is some of, and being okay with the messy process of that. As leaders, instructional leaders who are hiring people or bringing people in to do this kind of work, this takes longer systemic like time for systemic change versus just little pockets or one teacher at a time, or you know, to really change a system.
Yeah. Because like one thing to think about with this, because I'm glad you bring this up, because it can sound like it's customized where it's like one teacher for a long time, forever, but it's actually not. So I'm glad you brought that up. So think about a staff, right? Like think about a school you've been supporting, and of those teachers, is there a good number of those teachers who already kind of have the productive beliefs, and like they're sort of like kind of already like just wanting to just like they don't know about, like maybe they don't know about the 5 practices, or they don't know about some of these like counting like numeracy routines or something like that they're going to be implementing more. For them, like that, you can start with knowledge acquisition because they already have productive beliefs about students and teaching of math and stuff. You have others, like a good number of people who have like mild unproductive beliefs. Like, for example, just I'm gonna go around like with building thinking classrooms that like, that I just think it's a lot of, it's just going to create behavior problems, and it's just easier for me to control the kids if they're just sitting in their workbooks. It's just quieter, and that's just the way kids learn best, right? That's not like you can. I've been in classrooms where that's happening, and kids are thinking, and they're still learning. It's not super engaging or anything, but like it's not damaging to kids. You know, well, maybe I could make an argument that it is, but you know what I mean? It's not like one where it's like, this population of kids aren't capable of doing this kind of work, like that extreme one, right? So for that, the larger group that just maybe hasn't like bought into like a particular teaching practice, just doing really engaging professional learning coupled with in-classroom opportunities. Learning labs is my favorite because it's not just one-on-one, you've got a team of people planning. So you do really good professional learning, engaging them as learners in math, in whatever practices that you want them to see, has them experience that, which can help them see like, man, I got so much out of this. It was way more fun than most PD that I've ever done, because we're up on whiteboards, we're mixing up our groups, we're sharing all these ideas. Like this kind of works, right? And then if they see it with their kids, it's also like this really, like you can disrupt beliefs pretty like with large groups of people. The base 5 experience, like a room full of people. You can give me 200 people that say manipulatives don't belong in 5th grade classrooms, and in 45 minutes, I say 100% of that room will say, all right, maybe there's a place for it. So you can do it in mass, right? And that's kind of how you approach this as a coach, is think about the professional learning experiences, the professional learning networks you might do, the ways you allocate resources, et cetera, because you're going to move big swaths of people across this. But then there's ones who are in like that are really like where their belief systems are really preventing them from making any significant change here, because they've got these very unproductive beliefs. That's where you've got to like really drill in and do some of that disruption. And it's necessary. It's hard work. And one of the things I usually say with coaches is like, spend your initial energy on like where you already have the momentum. Because the other thing around change is that so Chip and Dan Heath talk about this around, they call it rallying the herd. And that when there's enough like a movement, like some momentum happening, where the majority of the staff is like, yeah, like we love this stuff. It's hard to like resist that, right? So you sort of create the conditions where there's already people who have success, we're hearing it. Then you go in and you work to like get into those individuals and try to tackle it from that stage. But yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because it could sound like you got to do this 1% at a time for like multiple years.
But I can see like in my experience, I'm trying to relate some of my own experience to kind of your stages, right? Or your step. And like knowledge acquisition can be done broadly, right? Like you're 200 people sitting in a room with a base 5, and then trying out the new role. Okay, now your job is to like go try out this one thing, take this one manipulative and go try it with your kids. And then your step 3, building confidence, like that's when you really can get personal, right? So you're talking about, here are these people in the room that are all super gung-ho. They came in with this growth mindset. They wanted to learn. They were excited about what you were about to present. And you had some people who weren't that way, right? So that's when you can get down and dirty with the building confidence. And that was when it has to become personal, right? So then you might be working one-on-one or with a small group or, you know, something like that. But I can see how it kind of almost funnels down to the personal work. But if you don't do all the steps, some people don't get to the building confidence, which I think is what you kind of said in the beginning, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And Molly, that's a good point too. And what it also raises is, like, let's say you do this, you have this whole school professional learning, you've got, like, you know, a lot of people are on board, but then some aren't. The disorienting dilemma doesn't always come from us too. It's like like their colleagues might, like, so as their colleagues are saying, oh my gosh, like, you remember that lesson that bombed last year for all of us? Like, I did it this year with, like, the white books and, like, you know, random groups, and we, like, introduced a task with everyone standing around us, and it was so much better. Like, that might, like, if I'm their colleague and I'm the resisting, it's like, well, all right, well, if they're finding success, maybe I should try this, right? It's starting to change that maybe there's something there. And so it also is a good reminder, Molly, maybe think of this, that it doesn't always fall on you to create those moments.
I think sometimes it's structural too, right? So if you're thinking about going into a school and you know, what I just said before, you have this kind of structure, but offering the district the idea of building in time for teachers to talk to each other about their experiences. Like, you also don't always have to be the one building confidence. Like, they can build confidence together if they're sitting down during a prep period or a grade level meeting or whatever it might be, a department meeting, where they can talk about their experience and what went right, what went wrong, and, like, what did you do when you did this kind of thing. Like, those are such powerful conversations that don't always happen because there's not a structure for them to happen in. So love.
Yes.
The
Well,
level of detail here is just
so how can people find more about the work that you're doing? We have a couple of options, but do you want to talk a little bit about your new kind of venture now that you're out?
Yeah. So I've so when I left Mount Holyoke, I just kind of started my own company, and it's I've always kind of done consulting on the side. Like, I think every teacher does. You either paint houses, wait tables, or you consult. Like,
right.
and I did all. I never waited tables, but I painted houses for a long time. But having left the college, I now run a consulting company, and it's so what we do is we work in school districts throughout Massachusetts, around the country, and around the world. Actually, I've been working with school in Saudi Arabia, so I get to go there once a year. I'll be going back next year, which I can't wait. I love going over there. And the work I do is customized professional learning around effective teaching practices, and then we do learning labs. Like, that's the big thing. So our whole model is doing professional learning to build teachers' content and pedagogical knowledge, and then looking at effective teaching practices, and then going into classrooms and enacting this stuff. And when we do these labs, it's not model teaching. We co-create lessons with teachers, and then we share responsibility. And it's a way for us to, like, really get in there and see, like, what effect does this have? How does this change the way your kids interact, and how they, you know, handle the math material, and how they retain it and everything. And so we do that. We're also building online courses, video-based ones. So I have a whole production studio now, and I've got a staff that we're making math tasks and free resources And we're hoping, so right now we're building our website. So we have a website that's like a temporary one that just kind of gives a little bit about what we do. But what we'll be having, hopefully in the next month or two, if we get it all put together, is a site with hundreds of free math tasks, routines, resources for teachers, like just that they can come and get this to just download and use in their classroom. And it's super fun. And then there's always just the speaking. So you can always catch me at conferences. I'll be at CMC Central next week. I'll be at the TDG conference next week as well, and NCTM, NCSM, and everything. And so those are just some of the places. I got a YouTube channel, which we'll be putting out a lot more content on as well. And we've got some big announcements coming up. Bringing on a new team member that I cannot wait to unveil. Gonna be pretty exciting.
That's a tease.
Oh yeah. We got it. Like, yeah, I can't wait. Like, we were actually like messaging before, like, when do we announce it? When do we announce it? So yeah, I'm just gonna leave it right there for now. But
all right.
So there'll be a big announcement of this really, really good partnership here. So yeah,
awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah,
very cool. Well, we're super excited and we can't wait to hear the news. So we're going to be waiting with bated breath on that. Thank you so much for being here with us today. This is awesome learning, and now our listeners are going to be all ready to attend all of those conferences that you just listed. So I'm ready, and I'm going to look up that video that you talked about already. So.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you all at one of the next conferences. You're going to be at MIM at all this year?
We are going to be where
we're going to Atomic
is next, I think.
Got it.
So yeah.
All right. Well, we will cross paths again.
Yes.
We sure will.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you all.
All right. Oh, that was awesome. So fun.
I know. The Heather article's behind me. We'll put it up on YouTube later. We could both remember the first name, but not the other one. So we'll put some resources up on that as well if you're interested in doing some more reading and understanding around transformational learning theory. So we are really excited about our next guest as well. We are, one fantastic math educator after another here happening this year. And so Kristen Acosta is going to be coming on and speaking with us on March 14th. So we're really excited about that. And we know that you will love the information that she is sharing as well.
Yeah, very high energy, high energy. So that should be another great one. So we are the luckiest that we get to talk to all these super cool people. And until then, we hope that you make math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone.